The sound was faint at first, just a whisper of movement against the peeling linoleum floor. I froze in the dimly lit corridor, my camera hanging around my neck, and held my breath. There it was again. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing down the hallway. "Is someone else in here?" I hadn't expected a response. The sanatorium had been abandoned for over 40 years, its patients relocated, its staff disbanded after the scandal. I'd researched it thoroughly for my urban exploration photography project. Nothing mentioned security guards or caretakers. I checked my phone. No signal. The thick walls and remote location made it a dead zone. I should have told someone where I was going. I turned back toward the entrance, my flashlight beam bouncing off dust particles. When I reached the main doors, I pushed against the heavy metal. They didn't budge. I pushed harder, then pulled, then slammed my shoulder against them. Nothing. The doors that had swung open so easily when I arrived were now sealed shut, with no visible lock mechanism on the inside. They must have been designed that way, to keep patients in, not intruders out. I would need to find another exit. The floor plans I'd studied showed service doors on the east wing and emergency exits on each floor. The dragging sound returned, closer now. I moved down the corridor away from it, passing abandoned nurses' stations and offices. My flashlight illuminated decades of decay, peeling paint, water-stained ceilings, scattered papers, and overturned furniture. I entered what appeared to be the records room. Metal filing cabinets lined the walls, many with drawers hanging open. I noticed a map of the facility mounted on the far wall and photographed it, the flash momentarily blinding me. When my vision cleared, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A manila folder placed neatly on the central desk. I approached cautiously. The folder was labeled Special Procedures, Ward C. Inside were photographs and clinical notes detailing experimental treatments performed on patients in the 1970s. The images were disturbing. Patients with electrodes attached to their shaved heads, restraints binding them to beds. The notes described attempts to excise trauma directly from the brain tissue and replace negative memories with positive constructs. The last page was a list of patients who had undergone these procedures. Beside each name was a handwritten note: failed, partially successful, or successful transferred. Only 3 names had been marked successful. Next to one of them, someone had scrawled, "Still here." A loud crash echoed from somewhere down the hall. I shoved the folder into my camera bag and moved toward the doorway. The corridor was darker than before, as if the shadows had thickened. My flashlight beam seemed weaker, barely penetrating the gloom. I checked the batteries. They were fine. Something else was absorbing the light. I headed toward the east wing. The temperature dropped noticeably as I moved deeper into the building. My breath formed small clouds in front of my face. Wasn't it summer outside? Another sound joined the dragging. Not footsteps, but something striking a hard surface with perfect timing. I quickened my pace, passing patient rooms with doors hanging from broken hinges. Inside, rusted bed frames still held rotting mattresses. Personal belongings, faded photographs, worn slippers, handwritten letters lay abandoned, as if the patients had expected to return. I reached a set of double doors marked Ward C. This was where those experimental procedures had taken place. I needed to pass through to reach the East Wing service door. Beyond lay a circular chamber with smaller rooms branching off like spokes on a wheel. The central area contained what looked like an operating theater, a reclining chair surrounded by antiquated medical equipment. Restraints hung from the chair's arms and legs. In the sudden silence, I could hear something else, breathing. Not my own. This was labored, wheezing, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Movement caught my eye, a shadow shifting within a shadow. The darkness in the corners seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I raised my camera and took a photo, the flash temporarily illuminating the room. In that brief moment of light, I saw them, 3 figures standing in doorways around the room. Their hospital gowns hung from emaciated frames, their heads unnaturally still, their eyes reflecting the light like animals caught in headlights. One was dragging a malformed leg. Another held a metal instrument, the source of the tapping. The light faded and they were gone. Or had they moved closer? I backed toward the doors I'd entered through, but they had swung shut. When I turned the handle, it came off and my hand rusted through. My only option was to continue forward. I chose the passage furthest from where I'd seen the figures. The corridor led to a hydrotherapy room. Large, rusted tubs lined the walls, still filled with stagnant water covered in dark algae. As I moved through the room, my flashlight reflected off the water's surface. One of the reflections moved against the pattern. I looked down into the tub beside me and saw a face beneath the surface. Eyes open, mouth frozen in a silent scream. I stumbled backward. When I looked again, the face was gone. A soft voice spoke directly behind me. "Are you here for treatment?" I spun around. A figure stood at the entrance, a woman in a nurse's uniform now yellowed with age. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken, but there was an unnerving precision to her movements. "You shouldn't be wandering," she said, her voice raspy yet somehow professional. "Patients must remain in their assigned areas." "I'm not a patient," I said, backing away. "I'm a photographer. I was just leaving." She tilted her head at an unnatural angle. "Everyone who enters is a patient. You wouldn't be here if you didn't need our special procedures." Behind her, I could see the 3 figures from before. The dragging sound resumed as one moved forward. "The doctors have been waiting for new subjects," the nurse continued. "Our last successful integration was so long ago." "What year do you think it is?" I asked, hoping to distract them. "Time is irrelevant in treatment, only the procedure matters." "And what is the procedure exactly?" "Memory extraction and consciousness integration. The doctors found a way to remove trauma by separating it from the patient. The trauma remains here, while the healed patient returns to the world." A chill ran through me. Those 3 were marked successful, weren't they? But they're still here. "Parts of them," the nurse nodded. "The parts they didn't want anymore. The doctors discovered trauma could exist independently if given somewhere to reside. We provide that residence." The 3 figures moved into the light. They looked human, but wrong, like someone had reassembled them without instructions. Their movements were disjointed, their expressions constantly shifting. "We've been waiting for someone new," one of them said, voice cracking with disuse. "Someone to share with." I bolted toward the far door. Behind me, I heard them giving chase, the dragging footstep, the tap of metal on tile, the nurse's measured steps. The door led to a stairwell. I took the stairs 2 at a time, climbing to the next floor. Faces pressed against some windows as I passed, not solid but translucent, like projections on smoke. At the end of the corridor was a window large enough to climb through. I ran toward it, already planning my escape. When I reached it, my heart sank. The window opened onto a brick wall, as if the outside world had been sealed away. I tried door after door, looking for another way out. One opened to my touch. Inside was a small room with a rusted bed frame and a nightstand. On the nightstand lay a journal, its pages yellow with age. The entries detailed a patient's experience with the special procedures. The final entry read, "They didn't tell me the memories would stay here, taking form. They didn't tell me part of me would remain behind while my body walked free." The door swung open. The nurse stood there, the 3 patients behind her. "Your procedure is scheduled now," she said. "The doctors are waiting." "What doctors?" I asked. "This place has been abandoned for decades. The doctors never left," she replied. "Their bodies returned to the world, but their knowledge, their purpose, that remained here. They're part of the walls now." I felt something cold brush against my mind, an alien presence examining me from the inside. "You carry such interesting trauma," the nurse continued, her voice changing, becoming multiple voices speaking in unison. In desperation, I raised my camera and triggered the flash directly in their faces. They recoiled, momentarily disoriented. I shoved past them and ran to the administration level. This floor had large windows showing the outside world, the overgrown grounds, the forest beyond, the road leading away. I tried to break a window using a chair, but the glass didn't even crack. It felt wrong under my touch, too warm, too yielding. I found an office with a telephone. I picked up the receiver and heard a dial tone. I punched in 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm trapped in the abandoned sanatorium. The doors are locked and there are people after me. I need help. Sir, that sanatorium burned down in 1981. There's nothing left but foundations. My blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I'm inside it right now. The line went dead. In the reflection of the window, I saw the nurse standing behind me. They never believe, she said. Not until they've had the procedure. I'd been working as a janitor in that lab for 4 months, but everyone avoided talking about the basement level called B4. One day the elevator accidentally dropped me down there, and the doors locked shut behind me. The things I saw inside those cages were enough to make me realize what was really happening in that facility. I should have known something was off from the beginning. The pay was too good for a simple cleaning job. The security protocols were extreme. Retinal scans, fingerprints, background checks that went back to elementary school. But I needed the money, and night shift work suited me. For 4 months, I cleaned the upper levels without incident. Offices, standard labs, break rooms. Nothing unusual except for the occasional odd stain that required special cleaning solutions provided in sealed containers. I never questioned what I was cleaning up. That was part of the deal. The scientists rarely acknowledged my existence. When they did, conversations ended abruptly if I asked about certain areas, especially B4. I'd catch whispers, containment protocols, genetic modification trials, neural integration, words that meant nothing to me then. That night started like any other. I was mopping the second-floor hallway when the power flickered. The emergency generators kicked in immediately, but something had changed. The elevator, normally requiring keycard access for certain floors, was blinking with all buttons available. I should have reported it, should have called security. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. 4 months of mystery, of locked doors and hushed conversations. I stepped inside and pressed B4. The descent took longer than expected. When the doors finally opened, I was greeted by a long, sterile corridor bathed in red emergency lighting. The air felt different, cooler, with an undertone of something medicinal and unfamiliar. I stepped out, pulling my cleaning cart behind me. The elevator doors closed with a soft hiss. When I turned to press the call button, nothing happened. No lights, no response. I was locked in. My first instinct was to find another way out. I moved down the corridor, the wheels of my cart echoing against the polished floors. The walls were lined with reinforced glass panels, each looking into what appeared to be observation rooms. The first few were empty, just medical equipment and examination tables with restraints. Nothing too alarming for a research facility. Then I reached room 7. The glass was frosted over, but clear enough to see the shape inside. Not human, at least not entirely. The proportions were wrong, the limbs too long, the head misshapen. It was contained in what looked like a large cylindrical tank filled with pale blue liquid. As I stood there, frozen in shock, the shape moved. It pressed a limb against the glass, leaving a handprint that was almost, but not quite, human. I backed away, bumping into my cart. The noise echoed down the corridor, and the figure in the tank reacted, turning what I assumed was its head toward the sound. Moving faster now, I continued down the hallway. Each room contained something worse than the last. Room 10 held what appeared to be a collection of organs functioning without a body, connected by tubes and pulsing with artificial life. Room 12 contained something that looked human from the neck down, but had features I couldn't comprehend where a face should be. In room 15, I saw something that stopped me cold. A person, or what had once been a person, floating in a tank similar to the others. Their eyes were open and aware, following my movement. Their mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass and liquid. Their body was altered, with sections of skin replaced by something transparent, revealing modified organs beneath. They raised a hand and pressed it against the glass. Written on their palm in what looked like self-inflicted cuts were 2 words: "Help us." I stumbled backward, heart pounding. This wasn't research. This was something else entirely. At the end of the corridor stood a set of double doors marked Central Control. If there was a way out, or at least answers, it would be there. I abandoned my cleaning cart and approached the doors. They opened automatically as I approached, recognizing the employee badge hanging around my neck. Inside was a circular room filled with monitors displaying feeds from each containment chamber. In the center stood a holographic projection of what looked like DNA strands being manipulated in real time. A computerized voice spoke overhead. Unauthorized personnel detected, security protocols engaged, containment procedures initiated. Metal shutters began closing over the doors. I lunged forward, barely making it through before they sealed completely. I found myself in what appeared to be a research library. Shelves of physical notebooks and folders lined the walls. Apparently, some information was too sensitive even for digital storage. One shelf was labeled Subject Origins and Acquisition. With trembling hands, I pulled out a folder and began to read. The documents detailed how the subjects were obtained. Some were volunteers. Terminally ill patients promised experimental treatments. Others were selected from specific genetic backgrounds. Some entries simply read involuntary acquisition, followed by a date and location. What they were doing to these people was beyond unethical. It was monstrous. Gene splicing with non-human DNA, neural network integration with artificial intelligence, consciousness transfer experiments, the creation of biological computing systems using human neural tissue. According to the logs, most subjects died during the procedures. Those who survived were often left in states described clinically as non-viable as functional humans, but successful as research outcomes. A noise from behind made me turn. A researcher stood in a doorway I hadn't noticed before, wearing a lab coat and an expression of shock. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice oddly calm despite the situation. "Cleaning personnel are restricted to upper levels only." "What are you doing to those people?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "People?" He seemed genuinely confused. "Oh, you mean the subjects? You misunderstand. They ceased being people when they signed the consent forms. They're research material now, advancing science beyond what conventional ethics would allow. That person in room 15 didn't look like they consented to anything." His expression hardened. Subject 15 was fully aware of the potential outcomes. All subjects are. The fact that some regret their decision after the process begins is unfortunate but irrelevant. He moved toward a panel on the wall. "I'm calling security. You'll need to be contained until we determine how much you've seen and what to do with you." I didn't wait for him to reach the panel. I grabbed a heavy research binder from the table and swung it at his head. He crumpled to the floor, not unconscious, but dazed. I searched his pockets, finding a high-level key card and a small tablet. The tablet was locked, but the card might give me access to areas beyond the sealed doors. As I returned to the main corridor, the lights in the containment rooms began to flash red. An alarm sounded, and the computerized voice returned. "Warning, containment breach in progress. All personnel evacuate immediately." The tanks in each room were draining, their front panels sliding open. Whatever was happening, it was either my chance to escape in the chaos or the beginning of a worse nightmare. I ran back toward the elevator, hoping the emergency might have reset the systems. The elevator remained dead. Near the end of the corridor was a door marked "Emergency Stairs." I swiped the stolen keycard and pulled it open. The stairwell was dark, lit only by small emergency lights. I began climbing, counting the floors as I went. B3, B2, B1, then finally reaching ground level. The door was locked with a keypad requiring a code. Behind me, I heard the door at the bottom of the stairwell open. Something was coming up from B4. In desperation, I tried the researcher's ID number from his badge, 4719. The light turned green, the door unlocked. I burst through into the main lobby, now eerily empty. The front doors were sealed with metal shutters, the containment protocol in full effect. No way out there. I made my way to the security office, using the key card to gain access. Inside, monitors showed feeds from throughout the facility. On the screens showing B4, I could see the containment rooms empty, their former occupants now free in the corridors. The security console had an emergency communication system still active. I broadcast a message to any receivers outside. "This is an emergency from inside the research facility. There's been a containment breach. Multiple test subjects loose. I'm trapped inside during lockdown. The things they're doing here, it's illegal. Human experimentation, people being transformed. Please send help." As I finished the transmission, the security office door slid open. Standing in the doorway was Subject 15, their altered body moving with unnatural grace. Behind them were others, subjects from the containment rooms, each modified in ways that defied comprehension. "You," Subject 15 said, their voice distorted but understandable. "You set us free." "I didn't mean to," I admitted. "It was an accident." Nevertheless, they moved into the room, the others following. "We've been waiting for an opportunity. Years, some of us." "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "Leave," Subject 15 said simply. "There's an emergency tunnel the researchers use. It bypasses the containment protocols." "You're not going to hurt anyone?" Subject 15 looked at me with eyes that were mostly human, but ringed with an iridescent membrane. "Most of us just want to go home. Some," they gestured to the more severely altered subjects, have other plans. They remember who did this to them. What about me? I asked. You have a choice, Subject 15 said. Come with us, or stay and explain to the authorities what happened here. They'll arrive once containment lifts in 72 hours. I thought about it. What would I say? Who would believe me? And what would the company do to keep me quiet? I'll come with you, I decided. Subject 15 nodded. Wise choice. The company doesn't allow witnesses to walk free. I followed them through the facility to a sublevel I hadn't known existed. There, behind a hidden panel, was a tunnel lit by dim emergency lighting. Where does this lead? I asked. Away, Subject 15 said. And that's all that matters now. As we moved through the tunnel, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen when we reached the outside world. What place was there for these altered beings? What place was there for me, now complicit in their escape? But I knew one thing for certain. I would never look at a help wanted sign the same way again. I locked the studio door and put on the last record when the broadcast unit powered up on its own. Through the static, I heard a voice I knew all too well. My own, but from 3 days in the future. I'd been working the graveyard shift at KZWR for nearly 6 months, a small radio station serving the town. Nothing exciting ever happened here. My show, Midnight with Marcus, typically consisted of playing obscure vinyl records and taking occasional calls from insomniacs and long-haul truckers passing through. Suddenly, the voice faded into static, then silence. After a while, the equipment returned to normal, the meters dropping back to their baseline readings. The record I'd queued up, an old album, resumed playing as if nothing had happened. I checked the recording equipment. The station automatically archived everything broadcast, but when I reviewed the last 5 minutes, there was nothing unusual. Just me introducing the album, then the music. Whatever I'd heard hadn't gone out over the airwaves. I tried calling the station manager, but at this hour, I only got his voicemail. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I'd received a warning from my future self? They'd assume I was another bored DJ pulling a prank. But on October 16th, things changed. I arrived at the station to find a note from the daytime DJ about strange interference they'd been experiencing. Brief bursts of static cutting into their broadcasts, sometimes with what sounded like fragmented voices. The station's equipment was old but reliable. Random interference wasn't common. I checked all the connections and found nothing obviously wrong. My show began normally. At 1:34 a.m., I was in the middle of introducing a Fleetwood Mac track when the console lit up again. The studio speakers crackled with static, and then I heard it, my voice, distant and distorted, repeating, "Don't trust comes tomorrow night." The transmission broke up, cutting in and out between bursts of white noise. "We'll say there's been an accident, need to verify. Stay inside. Change the locks." Then, clear as day, "They're using our voice, Marcus. They can sound like us now." The transmission cut off abruptly. The studio returned to silence, the Fleetwood Mac track picking up where it had left off. This time, I was ready. I'd set up my phone to record anything unusual, and I played back the clip immediately. The warning was there, captured in all its unsettling clarity. I tried the outside line again, but it was dead. No dial tone. I pulled out my cell phone, no signal. The station was in a remote area with spotty coverage at the best of times, but I usually got at least 1 bar of service. Tonight, nothing. I went to the window overlooking the parking lot. The station sat on a hill outside town, surrounded by pine trees. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city. Everything looked normal. No unusual vehicles, no strange figures lurking in the shadows. Yet something felt off. The night was too quiet, the darkness between the trees too absolute. I returned to the console and tried the emergency broadcast system. If there is some kind of threat to the town, I needed to warn people. But the system was unresponsive, the connection dead. I was completely cut off. The hours ticked by. I maintained my show as if nothing was wrong, playing records and speaking into the microphone with a calmness I didn't feel. At 3:41 a.m., the studio phone rang. I stared at it, watching the red light blink with each ring. The clock on the wall showed exactly 1 minute until the time my future self had warned about. On the 5th ring, I answered, putting it on speaker. "Midnight with Marcus. You're on the air." "Marcus, this is Sheriff Donovan." The voice was familiar. I'd interviewed the sheriff several times for the local news segment. "Sheriff, what can I do for you at this hour?" "There's been an accident on Highway 16 just past the station. Multiple vehicles. We need to evacuate the area. There's a tanker involved. Potential hazardous materials. I've got a deputy heading up to get you now." I hesitated. The warning had been specific. Don't leave the building. "Marcus, you there? This is serious. My deputy should be pulling up any minute." I moved to the window. A patrol car was indeed turning into the station's driveway, its lights flashing but siren off. "I see him, Sheriff, but I'm going to stay put for now. The station's on high ground, built like a bunker. I should be safe here." There was a pause. Then, "That's not an option, son. We have a mandatory evacuation order. The deputy will escort you to the safe zone." Something in the sheriff's tone had changed, a slight edge that hadn't been there before. "Let me grab my things," I said, stalling. "I'll be right out." I hung up and watched as a figure emerged from the patrol car. Even from a distance, something seemed off about the deputy's movements. Too smooth, too precise. The figure approached the main entrance. I heard the outer door open, then footsteps in the reception area. The handle of the studio door turned, but the lock held. "Mr. Parker?" "Deputy Collins. Sheriff sent me to evacuate you. Please open the door." The voice was perfect. I knew Deputy Collins, a young officer who'd been on the force for about 2 years, but something about this didn't add up. "Just a minute," I called out. "Finishing a broadcast." I quickly checked the security camera feed on my computer. The figure outside the door wore a deputy's uniform, but the image was grainy and dark. "Mr. Parker, we don't have time. Please open the door now." I remained silent, watching the monitor. The deputy tried the handle again, more forcefully this time. "Mr. Parker, this is a direct order from the sheriff. Open this door immediately." I remembered the fragment of warning. "They're using our voice." "I'm calling the sheriff to confirm," I said, though I knew the phones weren't working. The pounding on the door stopped. Then, in a voice that started as Deputy Collins but distorted into something inhuman mid-sentence, "We know you received the transmission. Open the door, Marcus. We only want to talk." A chill ran down my spine. The figure on the monitor was standing unnaturally still now, head tilted as if listening. Suddenly, all the equipment in the studio came to life, lights flashing, dials turning, meters jumping. Through the speakers came a cacophony of voices, all of them mine, overlapping. "Don't open the door." They found the frequency. 17 attempts. This is 18. They can only mimic, not create. The signal is the key. The security monitor showed the deputy, or whatever it was, backing away from the door, head tilted upward as if in pain. The voices continued, growing louder. "Broadcast the signal. 440. Hertz's pure tone. It disrupts their... I found the tone generator we used for emergency broadcast tests and set it to 440, the musical note A above middle C. With shaking hands, I connected it to the main broadcast output and turned it on. A pure, unwavering tone filled the studio. The figure inside convulsed once, then went still. For the next hour, I maintained the broadcast, watching as the false deputy remained motionless in the vehicle. Eventually, the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. As the sun rose, I saw a movement on the monitor. The figure in the patrol car sat up, but something was different. The movements were jerky, uncertain. The deputy stumbled out of the car, looked around in confusion, then up at the station. The studio phone rang again. This time, when I answered, the voice was unmistakably human, confused, frightened. Hello? Is anyone there? I think I'm Deputy Collins. I'm at the radio station, but I don't remember how I got here. I kept broadcasting the tone until my replacement arrived at 6 a.m. looking shaken. Have you seen what's happening in town? He asked. Some kind of mass hysteria. Together, we checked the station's recording archives. To our shock, all the strange transmissions were there this time. My future voice warning me, the sheriff's call, everything. As we reviewed the recordings, one final transmission came through, fragmentary, barely audible. 18 attempts, 18 failures, but we saved this frequency, we saved this night. Keep broadcasting, keep listening. They'll try again. The authorities investigated the events of that night, attributing everything to mass hysteria triggered by contaminated water. The official explanation was that I'd hallucinated the whole experience due to drinking the affected water from the station's cooler. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw.